Hey everybody, it's nice to see you. It's been a long time, or maybe not if you work with me at school. It hasn't been that long, but anyway, it's great to see you and welcome to the Fourth Friday freebie class. As you could see from the picture that was up earlier, we're doing fairy houses. And if you haven't painted with me before, after we're done with class tonight, this will be saved as a recorded video on Facebook, so you can always go back and look at it again or share it with a friend, or if you have to leave early, you can catch the rest of it on Facebook. Just go to my page and you can look up events and it'll show up there. So, and there's a bunch of them. There's classes all the way back since June or since May when I first started. So anyway, that is how it's going to work tonight. If you haven't done this before, you can always pop a question in on that chat and I'll try to look at it while I'm painting and answer while we're live. And if I miss it, I'll go back and I will answer it later. Who is telling me I'm cute? That's funny. Mrs. Hartman. Ugh. Anyway, all right, focus. We're going to paint. Okay, so that's all I have to tell you about that. The next class after tonight is going to be on the fourth Friday in April, which is April 23rd. I don't know what we're going to do yet, so if you have a request, you can put that in the comments too, because I always look at those and maybe I'll pick what your choice is. If you need any more information before we start painting tonight, you can go on my website, which is sacramentoartclasses.com, and you can see all the upcoming classes. I am starting a new watercolor class on April 7th. It's at night. And I'm starting a new acrylic class on April 8th. Which is also at night. So those are listed there, or you could sign up to get a newsletter there as well, and then it will inform you once a month about everything that's going on. So I think that's all I have to say to you. I'm going to move the camera back down onto the table and we'll start right away. I'm excited about this one. Okay, so again, if you get dizzy, look away because I have to move the camera down. It's like super high tech here. I use my cell phone and I have this crazy what do you call this thing? Tripod contraption that lets me look down on the top of my table, but every time I want to do something like zoom in for you, I have to stand on a little chair. So we're going to zoom in just a little bit because you'll want to be a little closer in. So bear with me while I make these adjustments. Come on camera. Okay. All right, we're going to try for that. Okay. My video, by the way, that I watch on the computer, on my monitor while we're doing this, is a little bit of a delay. So sometimes if I accidentally maybe get the paper out of your field of vision, it takes a second for the monitor to show me that that's happening. And but don't worry, I will make sure to change that up for you. So to start out, I did provide a sketch just today, I think it was, on Facebook, but I'm going to run through this with you anyway, so maybe you sketched ahead of time, but if you didn't, you can do that right now. And the way I do that is just kind of by tracing over this drawing step by step for you. So if you need to do that now, you should grab a pencil and your watercolor paper. I am going to be using this Sharpie just because it's nice and dark and much easier for you to see. So don't use a Sharpie, please. Use a pencil. And if you keep your lines light, like I tell the kids at school, you can erase them if you need to or if you make a mistake. And if you're just joining late, welcome. Hi, Joy. Hi, Judy. Nice to see you. All right, so let's get started. Feel free to make adjustments to this as you see fit, because I think it's pretty cool to make your fairy house your own unique thing. So if you don't want mushrooms over here and you want something else instead, then you should do that. If you want to embellish more than what I do, that's okay too. So our first step is going to be to draw this big tree trunk here. And as you can see from the sample, that is where this little fairy door is and where the fairies live. So leaving some space on either side of your paper for sky, however wide or thin you want your tree is up to you. So I've left, I don't know, 2.5 inches on one side and maybe 2 on the other. So you're going to take your pencil and you're going to go down, give yourself kind of, it doesn't have to be straight, it could be a little bit of a wiggly tree trunk. And then let's go out like this where we have a root happening. By the way, my painting is going to be on 9 by 12 paper. So in case you are wondering, sometimes people want to know that. Hi Grace, welcome to class, Grace. And let's go over here to the other side of the tree and we'll start down here. And I did make that kind of stick out a little bit as though it's just an old fat tree trunk. And I'm stopping right here above where I'm going to have this mushroom. So you can notice that this side goes all the way down to a tree root, but let's keep that one up a little higher so that we can draw the mushroom. I can't erase with this, of course, but if you did draw yours all the way, you can always erase and make room for your mushroom. Okay. Now, since we're talking about mushroom, we might as well put that in, and it's just a circle, like a half circle or a dome shape, and you can give it a little curve on the bottom, or maybe if you like it better where the bottom is a little more flat or straight like this one, you can do it that way. And then just give yourself a little stem. I'll try to pause in between on this, but I always want to be conscious of the time because it's my goal for us to finish on time. And we did it last month for the first time ever. The sloth finished on time. So I'm going to make that my goal here too, because I know you might want to watch something on Netflix, or if you're eating dinner late or going to bed, I don't want to hold you up too long. Okay, so we did our mushroom. Now, remember how you had your tree trunk that came down. We're going to don't draw through the mushroom, but kind of trace your pen in the air across the mushroom so that the root or the side of the tree that becomes the root comes out on the other side of the mushroom. So we're just making sure that that's kind of a smooth line that the mushroom is interrupting. And if you want, since you're over here, you can have another mushroom or 2 or 3 or whatever you like. Same idea, kind of that dome top, or maybe like a half circle sort of. This one almost is shaped like an eyeball. Charlene, I see your message. I remember you. I want to talk to you. I'm going to talk to you later. I'm so glad you're here. Okay, back to the tree root. Let's go over here to this other side, and we have this kind of forked root. So to get that fork happening, you're going to do a little line following this side of the root and go like this. It's like an upside down V that's very wide. And then we're going to go follow this side of the V to create that other fork in that root, and let's bring it up around to join the tree, and it comes around and it's going to form another root right here. So I just ended right there. And finally we have to finish off this root, so I'm starting at the bottom right next to where that root ended, and I'm going to bring it up to here, and we'll eventually have these steps. It must feel weird to you because unless you've drawn ahead of time, it probably feels weird looking at what I already have, but you have nothing on your paper. I always wonder about that. I hope it works out okay for everybody. All right, so now let's set our door in there. I liked a domed, or a what do you call that, an arched doorway, but you can have any kind of doorway that you want. So if you do want the arch, I'm just starting it down low and making an arch shape that comes up. And remember, fairies have to find all their building materials in nature, so nothing is perfect. So things are crooked or old or repurposed, like this lamp is a repurposed acorn. So don't be too worried about being perfect on things. So, and that said, I'm going to show you that my bottom of the door here is very crooked on purpose. So I just kind of came over and I'm going to do one little plank. I didn't draw the pencil line all the way up. And then I'm going to do another board, maybe that one's longer. And I did same thing, my pencil line doesn't go all the way up, or my pen line, I guess. Remember, if you just got here and you see me working with a Sharpie, please use a pencil. I'm only using the Sharpie so that it's dark enough for you to see. And then here comes my next board, and you can continue on and do all the boards. I happen to have 5, but if you have 6 or 4, that's okay. So there's the door. And as you're doing this, you probably are coming up with cool ideas of what else you could find in nature and use in your fairy house. So remember, feel free to add those. Mine has a couple of steps up to the door, and then these maybe are kind of pavers. You can see in the sample they're like rocks that are pavers. So I did leave a little bit of gap here where wood shows, and you can do that, or you can make this step right immediately below the door, and it's just kind of a skinny long rectangle shape. And below it, I'm doing another one, and I'm keeping them imperfect. So it's a little crooked maybe. It's not exactly a rectangle shape. We just got to get some way for this little bitty fairies to climb up into that door. Although maybe I guess they could fly, but I'm trying to have them be civilized and walk in. All right, once you get those, let's not forget on this side, we have to give this tree a bottom and a bottom to the root. So kind of near this step, I created the bottom of the tree, skipped behind that mushroom there, and then I skipped behind the other mushroom. So then my tree root goes off the side. It kind of forms like a nice little garden for them here, as how the roots almost hug around that garden. By the way, after we do the drawing, I'll talk for a minute, so that you don't feel so rushed. I'll talk about my paints before I start painting, so if you have to make adjustments on your drawing, you'll have some time for that. Okay, so let's do a couple of pavers. These are a little bit more oval and irregular kind of organic shapes, not particularly geometric. They're just loose. And here's one here. And then you can fill in around them with however many rocks you want. Or pebbles, I guess. I try to leave the bottoms a little bit flatter on these so that it doesn't look like they're just a marble sitting there. Maybe they're kind of pressed into the lawn or somehow flat on the bottom. It might even be nice if you have a couple right next to each other. So I'm going to add an extra one right here. So take a little bit of time to add as many or as few as you want there. And we're almost done with the drawing. How are we doing? Am I going too fast? Or if you think it's okay, you can give me a thumbs up on the chat or say okay or something, just to kind of give me a heads up on how we're doing. Above the door, I did two different things. I wasn't so thrilled with how this one worked out. I was trying to create an awning sort of feeling with a bunch of sticks. So if you could imagine, the sticks were like my fingers here. I wanted it to be an awning, and I splayed them out a little so they're kind of open, and I put some moss over it. So if you like that, you can do that kind. But maybe it's easier for you to have this type. This is just supposed to be kind of two sticks. So again, they're irregular and they're maybe crooked, because they were found by these guys in nature. So I did this kind of doorway arch. You could even have them crisscross if you want. Thanks, Tina. Thanks, Karen, for letting me know. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mrs. Hartman, not Tina. And let's do our acorn next. So I put the cap on first. Has sort of two curved lines, and here's a little bitty stem. I forgot to put the stem on earlier. And then the bottom, if you really look closely at an acorn, they're kind of wiggly at the bottom. So you can put a little wiggle on there if you want to. I know it's probably not so easy for you to see, so let me get that a little closer to the camera. And you can see I didn't trace exactly perfectly over the line that I already had there, but you get the idea. You can wiggle it a little if you want to. And then let's put in the acorn itself, which is our light bulb or our lamp. And only a few more things and we're done with our drawing. I wanted a fence over here on the left side, so I just chose a bunch of sticks that they found out in the forest, and some of them are forked, some of them are crooked, some of them are taller than the others and shorter, so make yours however you want. And as far as how many, that's up to you. If you feel like you need a lot to close off that side of the yard so that they can keep their fairy dog inside the yard, you can give it more. If you need less, you can give it less. Some of them might be thicker than the others or thinner than the others. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 7. And when you're done with 7, you can just put a little indication of maybe a bush or two down here. Just a couple wiggly lines, nothing fancy. We'll fill all that in with paint. Okay, so this is the part where I'm just going to talk to you for a while because you might still be drawing or making some adjustments. So I'll leave this here for you to look while I'm talking. In the event itself, I listed the colors that I'll be using, and so just as a review, I'm using ultramarine blue in the background, and it looks like I probably used a second blue in there. It's a little lighter. It might be peacock or it might be cerulean blue. So there's 1 or 2 blues in the background. My bark color is raw umber, or you might have Van Dyke brown. So whatever your brown is, we're using that. The door is a few layers of color. I have a yellow underneath, and then I put a burnt sienna, which is an orangey brown, over the top of that to create the look of different colors in the wood. The foreground is mostly sap green and the bushes. What else do we have? Here's our yellow again, and then there's also another green, so I'm using sap green and probably also hooker's green. Whatever your red is, I think my red is alizarin crimson, and on the stones, if you have a black that you can dilute a lot with water and make a gray, that's great, but I used something called neutral tint on mine. And before I ever start painting, I always like to use my spray bottle and mist a little water on the colors that I'm going to use because it kind of gets them primed. It's really hard to paint with very dry paint, and I see this at school all the time. Kids, we did a lot of watercolors this week for sure, but kids sometimes are afraid to add enough water in there, and so they're trying to paint with these dry brushes and they're not getting anywhere. So if you pre-wet your paints a little bit with either a drop of water or two from your brush or a little bit of spray mist, that will really help you out. The brushes that I'm going to use tonight are, I don't know if I'm going to really use all of these, but I'll show them to you just in case. So I have 5 different ones here. If you have to do everything with the one brush that came with your kit, it's probably going to be one of these round brushes. The larger one that I'm using is a number 12, and the smaller one is, what is this, a number 6. So you can do this whole painting with a round brush if you need to. But sometimes, for sake of speed, I use some larger brushes just so I can get things done fast enough for you all and get us done on time. So those 2 I'll probably use. I might use one of these flat brushes. So if you have one, great. If you don't, that's okay. The larger red one here is a 1.5 inch flat brush, and the other one is just a 1 inch flat brush. So you can use one of those if you want. And then I have a little bitty detail brush, which is smaller than a fingernail polish brush. So if you have something like that, that might be helpful for things like the grass or this door handle. But again, if you don't have that at all, we can make everything happen with this brush that comes usually with your set. Okay? All right. Can I get a thumbs up? Are we ready to go on, do you think? I'm painting small enough today. Thanks for the thumbs up. I'm painting small enough today that I should be able to keep these side by side for you throughout. And I'll tell you what color paint I'm dipping into as I go, because I know that you can't see all that. So I will let you know that. Okay, let's start with the tree trunk. And because I know that you probably only have a round brush unless you paint all the time, I'm going to try and do as much of this with this one as I can, so that you don't feel like I'm leaving you behind or that you can't do it because you don't have the same kind of brush that I have. All right, so please have your towel or a paper towel handy so that you can blot, because there's going to be times when I'm going to ask you to have a little bit drier brush than maybe you're used to. And part of that will be on this tree bark. So I am going to be getting a nice puddle of brown going, and this happens to be Van Dyke brown. And this, unfortunately, this paint is a little old, so it's kind of chunky, but I think it actually might help me out on this because it's going to make my bark look gritty and older. But I like to have a nice puddle going in the paint. So, and then I'm going to get as much off the brush as I can by scraping like this, because I want to show you a technique that's called dry brushing. And if your brush is super wet, it won't work. So dry brushing looks like this. You hold your brush almost, well, pretty much parallel to the paper. So you're not painting up on the tip like this. You're going to paint flat, and the effect that we want to have happen is as you first start painting, you'll see that your brush skips. Look at all that white showing. I'm going to go over, skip that acorn, and I'm still going as far as I can go until my brush runs out of paint. And that way we have this very rough looking surface to our tree trunk, and it gives it a barky effect. Hi Marcia, nice to see you. Hi Aurie. So when you run out of paint, you can go to the next one. And did you see how I just wiggled my brush, especially right here? I did that because I don't want to have perfect stripes going down. I want it to look like I'm doing, my tree trunk is very organic. I don't want it to look like a fence. I'm painting the fence. So the whole time I'm painting, I'm keeping the brush as flat to the paper as I can. And if you don't get as much of a like choppy effect as I do, it's probably because of your paper and my paper are different. My paper probably has a little more texture than yours. And so that's okay, because you can still get some interesting things with whatever paper that you have. So I'm going to ask you to continue on, and if you start noticing that you get some stripes, try to wiggle it up a little bit. So let's see if I can make a stripe happen on purpose. Okay, there's one coming right here. If that happens, don't let that keep going straight down the page. Do a wiggle or move your brush around a little bit different way. I don't want you to scrub with the brush because it can kind of wreck the hairs on the brush, but don't be afraid to move it around in different ways. So I'm being a little bit careful around these sticks here, but not super careful because we're at a point where it's early in the game and we don't want to get paint on there too much, but if a little gets on there, we don't care too much. Okay. And the trick here is keep moving your brush until it's running out of paint on the paper, and then you get that real rough, choppy look. So you're going to do the whole entire tree trunk. Maybe this time I'll pull up this way. I'm still keeping my brush kind of flat, and sometimes I turn my brush over because maybe there's more paint on the other side of the brush, but I still have to dip in because, you know, you run out of paint. Let's see, what did I miss? I missed this little area under the door, so I'm going to get that. I'm going to go under the mushroom. Let's see, where did my rock? Okay, this is my step. I have to watch out for my step. There will be times when you absolutely have to kind of go more up on the point of the brush, especially when you're carving around some of these little items. You can't keep your brush flat at that time, and that's okay. Because if you notice on this painted one to the left here, we're going to do multiple layers, and so we'll maybe use a few different colors on here. So there will, some of these little skips where the white shows through, where the white of the paper shows through, they will eventually go away. So if you don't have as many skips as I do, don't worry about it. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to scroll through here and see if anybody asked me a question that I missed. But all you guys, thank you for all those thumbs up. It helps me know, when I can't see you, it helps me know if you're ready or not. So I think, hi Wynn, nice to see you. Okay, I don't see any questions. So I did see a thumbs up, so I think somebody is ready to go on, but I'll wait just another minute in case you guys need time. It is nice to vary the paint color if you can. So what I mean when I say that is maybe on the next pass of paint that I do, I have this brown right here. What if I took a little bit of brown and I put it out here in my palette? My palette's dirty, but that's okay. And so I have a puddle. Maybe you have room in, if you have a paint lid or some palette or something, you can do that. Give yourself a little room to mix. So here's that brown, but maybe I'm going to add another color into it. And I did mention burnt sienna. So my burnt sienna, it's kind of an orangey brown. It's what the door color is, but I want to add a little bit into this brown so that I can go a second pass and have just a slightly different color. I think it adds a richness to your paint. So if you don't have burnt sienna, maybe you're going to add some green into your brown or maybe a little orange. Just give us a slightly different shade of brown. And when you feel ready for that, you'll go and do another pass here. And then we'll have to let it sit for a while because it's going to get pretty wet, I think, eventually, and we might come back to it again another time. So here we go again. And oh, I want it to be a little bit, still a little bit more different. I'm going to add a little more burnt sienna into that. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to go on again, keeping the brush kind of parallel. And I'm seeing skips. Oops, I got a splatter there. You don't have to completely follow all the way down like I did with one big solid line. You can move around and do maybe the upper part first and then get down to the lower part, whatever works for you. If you have to go up on point around the items, that's totally fine, because now that we did that first pass, you already have the skips in there. So now we're kind of starting to cover them, so we don't really care as much if we get the skips on the second time because we have them on the first time, and usually you can see through the different colors of paint, the different layers of paint, and you'll be able to still see that they're there. Makes sense, I hope. What paint do I recommend? Well, I have become I always was, but even more so now, I love Daniel Smith paints. They're expensive though. So right here next to me, I have a palette of Daniel Smith paints that I've made into this little travel palette. And these are tiny, these are half pans. So that's a good, if you want to spend money, that's one of my favorite brands. If you don't want to spend as much money and you're just kind of testing it out, trying to see if you even like watercolors, you can use something like Blick. Dick Blick art stores have their own brand, and it's really very affordable, and they're good paints. So you could use their brand. You could also buy them on their website. So Dick Blick is good. Winsor Newton is very easy to find. Practically every art store always has Winsor Newton paints. And they also make a student grade, so if you're just learning, you can buy those, and they are less expensive but still good. Their student ones are called Winsor Newton Cotman, C-O-T-M-A-N. But if you have money to burn, Daniel Smith is great. They have like a bajillion colors, and they do really interesting things. They do what's called granulating. So it's kind of like the pigment that separates from the binder or the wet part of the paint, and they kind of separate on your paper, which sounds like it would be bad, but it's actually really interesting and cool, yet neat effects. And they just have so many colors, and they're just so great. I don't know. And I don't get paid for saying that. Too bad. Daniel Smith, are you listening? Margaret from Melbourne, Australia. First of all, love your name. And second, welcome from Australia. How great is that? You probably were going to win the prize for coming the farthest, even though you only are probably in your living room. But Welcome to class. What time is it there? Take a look around and see if there's any little areas that you missed, like this tree root. I wanted it to come up a little bit higher. And then we're going to let this tree rest. We're not done with it. We still have to do more, but we're going to let it rest for now. And we're going to work on a different area as soon as I fix that. It's 1:30 p.m. in Melbourne, Australia. Wow. Okay. Well, here we are at 7:30. Thank you for coming. Okay. Now that I've done all that, I'm going to switch to a little bit smaller brush. And so if you guys are using the one like this that probably came with your set, we'll be using the same thing together now because I need to go to a smaller brush. We're going to come back to this tree more later, so it's not going to stay looking like this. It's going to get richer and more full. Full? Is that, I don't know if that was the right word. It's gonna look more filled out. Okay. Now, let's do some of the door. We need to be a little careful though. Let me ask you this. Your tree, if your tree right here is super wet, give me a thumbs down because then I will switch up my idea and we won't do the door yet. So if it's a little damp, that's okay. But if it's shiny at all or if you see any puddles, maybe give me a thumbs down and we'll pick something different to do first. So I'll wait a second to see if people will thumbs down me. Anybody? Okay, thanks, Sienna. Hi, how are you? All right, so let's do this. I would like you to find a nice yellow. Maybe you have a more, here's 3 different yellows. I like these 2. They're a little bit more golden colored. This one right here is like a lemon yellow. If you have something that's a little more golden or orangey, put down one of those. If you don't, you can mix a little orange in with your other yellow and give us kind of a warm color. So I just want you to paint the whole entire door yellow for now. It's going to sound weird, but we're again going to go back over it, and having it painted yellow first is going to give it a nice glow like what I have on this wood over here next door. And I think you will like it in the end. That's the beauty of using watercolors, especially transparent watercolors, is that you can see the colors through each other and you get that nice richness to your painting. And while you're at it, you might as well do your acorn too, since we're here. Just the bottom part. And we'll be doctoring that up. It's not going to remain pure yellow like that. Margaret, this what you're seeing right now live will be automatically recorded by Facebook. So if you come back at whatever time, all you have to do is go to my page there, Sacramento Art Classes, where you are. And then if you click on the tab that says events, it'll show you all of these free classes that I've done since way back a year ago in May. And you'll find this one, and you can just click on it. I leave them up there indefinitely, so so you can catch that later when you have time. All right, let's see. What shall we do next? How about we do get yourself a red. The red that I'm using, I know I said alizarin crimson, but I'm kind of thinking I might use a little bit slightly more pinkish red, just for kicks. And remember, this is fantasy, so you can have a purple mushroom, you can have a bright green mushroom, whatever color you want. I have spots on this mushroom, so if you want spots and you feel like you need to draw them with a pencil first, please go ahead and do that, and then you can leave them white. And in watercolor, the white is just the white of the paper. So if you want spots, you can draw them, or you can just carefully put them in with your paintbrush. Maybe I'll have one going off the edge here, and then you can paint around them. So since I'm lazy, I did not go and get my pencil. I'm just doing this, and there we go. I'll stick with 4 spots for now, and then I'm just going to paint the rest of my mushroom, leaving those spots white. Maybe I need another one up here. This part's going to take you a little bit because you need a little bit of a steady hand on this if you're leaving spots. So I will pause afterwards. So if you feel like you have to rush, I'll pause on this and give you time to get that done. This color that I'm using is called Quinacridone Rose. It's like a pinkish red. And by the way, these spots up here at the top, when we paint the blue sky, it will give us the, how do you describe it? It will identify that this is a spot here and not like a bite taken out of it. It's going to create a blue line. The sky will create a blue line to kind of define that spot for us. The brushes that I'm using are, this one is a Utrecht. Utrecht is the brand that's now Blick, and it is a Kolinsky sable brush. So this is probably around an $18 to $20 brush. You guys probably have just either a squirrel hair brush that comes in your kit, or maybe you have a synthetic brush. Synthetic is fine. It's great because you get a nice snap to the brush, meaning it's not floppy. But that's the one that I use, and I only use my watercolor brushes for watercolors. I never use them with acrylics or other paints because then they'll last forever. This brush is probably 20 years old and it is in great shape. Here's this other little guy. So if you're quick and you've already done the big one, you can do the little one, or maybe you have more than just 2. I only did 2 tonight for sake of time, but you can do as many as you need to. Could you paint the white spots after the red dries? If you have white paint, yes, Vina, you could. I don't use a lot of white paint, and you have to be a little careful because even though the red is going to dry, sometimes the white paint might reactivate it and your white spots could end up being pink. But if you put that white paint on really thick and the red is super dry, you're probably going to be in good shape. Let me see, any other red right now? Not right now, that's it. Actually, let me put I'll put another little mushroom over here. I didn't draw it, but it's nice to bounce colors around and not just have one place where the red is. So, because our eye is going to just go right there automatically. But if we put another mushroom somewhere else, then our eye will travel a little bit. So I'll just create another little guy over here just for fun and maybe give him a little friend. I don't have stems on these yet, but those are just their little caps. Would you guys like me to zoom in a little bit more, or are we okay like this? Zoom in a little bit. Okay, I will. The next step when we're done zooming in here is we're going to go back to that tree trunk again. You're going to see me skipping around on purpose because I do that strategically so certain areas dry while other areas we're working on, and then we don't have to wait for the paint to dry. And by the way, you can always use a hair dryer or a heat gun. I have a heat gun right here. Looks like this. And it's hotter than a hair dryer. It actually can scorch or burn your paper, or if you have plastic nearby, it can melt it. So if you use one of these, you want to just keep it moving and keep it away from your paper a little bit. So I may end up having to use that tonight for a second. So you're going to have to hear a little noise if I do, because I can't mute myself while we're on Facebook Live. I teach on Zoom also. Those classes I mentioned earlier, I teach those on Zoom during the weeknights, and it's nice because I can mute myself if I need to, but here, not so much. Okay, let's make sure everything is over as much as I can get it so you can see. Okay, are we ready to go on? When you are ready, we're going to go back up to that tree like we talked about. Thanks, Sienna. And I switched back to the larger brush again. So I'm just going to have you do another pass on the tree. And if you have any little white speckles left, chances are after this pass, most of them or all of them will get covered over. And that's okay, because you'll still see through the layers of paint that they were there. And you'll get that effect that we want of having kind of a roughness to the bark. You notice at the top of my paper, I'll show you, I'm not painting all the way to the end of the paper, because if I decide to frame this, I'm going to crop it right there. I don't need a really, really tall tree trunk, so that's why I'm not painting all the way to the end of the paper. If you are, that's okay, because I don't know what size paper you're using, and maybe there's a reason that you need to or want to go all the way to the edge of the paper, but I'm explaining to you why mine doesn't, in case you're curious. I'm going to switch back and forth a little bit between brushes because I want to carve around these items, and the smaller brush is more helpful to me, so if you need to do that, you can also. Always use the tool that works the best and is the easiest for you. So I'm carving around these sticks, and I'm going to carve around the door. Oh, thanks, Margaret. You're asking, the question is, how did I get the texture in the tree trunk? The way that I got the texture is I'm using a rough paper. I'm using Arches 140-pound rough paper. I think in the supply list I mentioned that you could use cold press or rough. Rough just has more texture already, so it has these bumps and these high and low points in the paper as it's milled. And so when we drag the brush on it like we were when the brush was flat and parallel to the paper, it naturally will get all those high points, and then it'll miss those little valleys. So that's how I got it. But even if you're using regular Arches cold press, or just like a pad of paper, I'm not sure what brand you all are using, you will still get some of that effect if you do that dry brushing where you're dragging the brush flat. And in case you miss that part, the brush is parallel to the paper like this and not very much paint on it, and I just kind of pull it down. This has a little more paint on it than it should to really illustrate that for you, but I just drag it until it runs out of paint on the paper, and it just does that skipping naturally on its own. You might notice that I have another color of paint on here, and that's okay. I'm just trying to give some variety to this, and so this is a little burnt sienna. The other color that I'm using is Van Dyke Brown. And so I just dip into one and then maybe dip into the other and pull this paint around, filling in everything. Whoops. You can see why you need a smaller brush for this part, huh? You just have to be more careful about getting around everything. Those little black spots that you see on my tree trunk, that's because the brown, the Van Dyke Brown that I'm using is super old, and it's kind of chunky. It's almost like gritty, and those little pieces of grit are getting on my paper here and there. And when it dries, I can just brush them off. But that's not supposed to happen. We don't want that. But it's just because this paint that I'm using is old. And when I use it all up, I'll clean it out of the palette and put something new in there. So I won't have that happen. If you missed earlier when I mentioned, if you need more information about classes and things, my website is sacramentoartclasses.com, and if you go there, you can see a list of upcoming classes. You can sign up to get a newsletter, and that will notify you about classes. You can, I think I probably have an old blog on there. But basically, you can just get more information there if you didn't catch anything that I said. So I'm just kind of going back over and making sure that I've gone over everything, getting my tree a little bit darker, using a few different shades of brown so that I get some variety in here. Ugh. See how gritty my paint is? If you're looking at all, you'll see these little pieces everywhere. And they're almost like coffee grounds. And so for me, that's okay because I know that I can brush them off later and it adds to the effect. But normally that would be super undesirable in a painting. But luckily we're doing tree trunk, so it's okay. Is there a supply list? There's a supply list for this class inside of the Facebook event. So when I first post the event, I put a list of all the colors. Can't remember whether I put it on my website too. I usually do. On the art classes page, it'll show all of these, but it'll also show the other weeknight classes. And usually I list all the colors there. But if you don't find it, then well, I won't see you at school for a few weeks, but you could always call me or email or text me, and I will give you the information later too in case you want to paint it another time. Okay, I'm going to pause here and let you guys catch up. And strategically, I'm also waiting for this stuff to dry. If you are already ahead and you've done all this and you have access to a hair dryer, you might want to give yourself a little drying on the tree. So I'm actually going to do that with my heat gun right now. So you'll hear a little bit of noise for a second, but it's not super loud. And I just need to be able to move forward. So this is a little bit damper than I want it to be. So I'm just going to dry that real quick. Okay, thanks for hanging in there while I did that. Hopefully it wasn't too loud for you. Can you thumbs up me if you feel ready for me to go on with something else? Thank you. I see only one, so it tells me that everybody else, oh, a couple are coming. There we go. A few people are ready. Venus ready. Okay, good. All right. So, let's see. Let me think about this. Your tree trunk is probably a little damp still. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus us down here for a while on some grassy area and the rocks and things. While we let this guy dry out, and then we're going to go up and we're going to do some sky. Okay, so what brush am I going to use? Let's use, I'll stay with that kind of smaller one for you guys, and we're going to do a little bit of a technique that's called wet into wet. And what that just means is you're going to pre-wet the paper with just water. Then we're going to put green on it, so for the grassy area. The reason that we do that is because it makes it move around and blend faster for us. So I don't want you to totally soak your paper, and if these roots are a little bit damp still, you may see some bleeding of colors, but that's okay down in here because it's, you know, the grassy, mossy area. So if some brown and green mixed together, you'll be okay. So let me push the paper up a little higher to make sure you can see everything happening. You want to avoid these rocks that you've placed for the most part. So let's go over here on this side, and I did not do the stems on those mushrooms yet, so we don't have to worry about that. I'm going right up to the base of the mushroom, so my line is right about here, not on these bushes, but just kind of about where I laid those mushrooms. I'm gonna wet. I'm not getting any water on the tree trunk. I'm just going in that grassy area. Then I'm gonna come in here, do the same thing. And you don't want giant puddles or lakes, but definitely we want to see a little bit of shine on the paper. And as we go around and pre-wet this stuff, it's going to start drying where we first laid that water, and that's good. It gives us a little bit of, it's just getting the paper wet or damp. And again, here I'm going around the rocks. You'll see something interesting and magical in a minute. And what that is that if you keep your rocks dry, as we add green paint into this wet area, but the rocks will stay dry because you're not wetting them, none of that green paint is going to flow into those rocks at all. As long as they're dry, what the paint that we put down will not get on the rocks. If a little bit does, it's not the end of the world, and it'll be okay. So I'm just being a little bit careful to go around them. And if you can't see because you're painting with clear water, you will eventually be able to see when we add that green paint, because you'll see the places where water hasn't gone and where the paint can't travel because the paper's dry. So it's a mouthful. It's hard to describe, but you'll see it, and then I think you'll understand. Okay, so I've pre-wet all that, and whatever green you choose, I have sap green and hooker's green, so I'm going to probably get some of each. So let's go back over here where we started, and you're going to just put some of that green on. If your paper is really wet, then this green will swim fast everywhere. It's going to swim all around. If your paper is just damp, this green will move slowly, and you'll see, let me see if I can illustrate my point here. Over here, this is going to swim around, but it's not going to get on any of those rocks. Even if I tip it, you can see the paint stops. See how it's making that hard edge, and it's going around the bottom of that rock? It's not going into the rock because I kept it dry. It's just a little trick to get cool effects, to help your paint move faster. You still have to come around in here and sort of help and babysit a little bit, but it makes things happen faster if you pre-wet your paper. So here you probably will have to come in and carve around those tree trunks and maybe get it a little closer if you didn't get your water all the way up there. But you got a little help from the beginning by having the wet paper. You can see that I'm painting right over where I'm going to have those stems, because I'm going to make the stems darker on this one than I did on the sample that's on the left side here. So I don't have to worry about keeping those stems white. I'm going to make them kind of a gray color in this new painting. By the way, every one of these paintings that I do are always for sale if you're interested. So the tonight one or the previous one is, and you can always just put a little, send me a message or put a little question about it up into the chat or something. Okay. Oops, I missed some spots here. When we get up to the sky, we're going to do the same exact technique up there where we pre-wet the paper, and then we're going to use the put the paint in, because sometimes when we have large areas like we do on this grass or on the sky and we're trying to paint it with a small brush, it's really hard to get a nice even flow if you're just painting onto dry paper. But if you paint on wet paper, things flow around and look more smooth. Okay, Leslie, I'm reading your message that you have to go. The easiest way to find it, if you're still here, is when you come back the next time, click on the events tab in my Facebook page, and it will take you to all the past events, including this one, and just click on it, and there you'll be right at the video. So that's the easiest way. You can always scroll through and find it, but if that's troublesome, then you can just go to that events tab. Thank you for coming. I'm just tipping my paper just a little bit right now because maybe I want to see if some of this paint is going to run around a little bit. You don't have to do this. I'm just trying to see if it's going to flow anywhere else for me. I want to make these bottoms of these rocks a little bit flatter. There we go. And then if you would, give me a thumbs up when you're ready for the next part. We can move on. We are doing good. We have 30 minutes left, right? Yes, we go from 7 to 8:30, and I feel like we're going to finish. Always the goal, but I'm feeling pretty good about this. I hope you are too. If you want to be fancy with that foreground while it's still wet, you can do fun things like, as long as it's wet and shiny, you can take another color, let's say a nice yellow, and you can just touch a little yellow in here and there, and you'll really see things swimming around. And it just, I'm not trying to make polka dots or anything, but I just want to have a little variety in there, and it'll make these nice, they're called blooms, where that really wet paint that's on my brush is pushing the other paint that's already down here, pushing it around, and you get these really interesting effects. You can do that with a yellow. You can add a different color of green if you want. Just a fun thing to do. Okay, I'm seeing some thumbs up. So let me just scroll up and make sure I see more than just a few. Okay, maybe we need another minute or so on the grass. If you're waiting, if you're ready to go and you're waiting, you could start getting a nice puddle happening in your blue paint, because we're going to need a lot. So we want it to be good and juicy. This is what I mean. I'm going to take that larger brush again, and I'm going to use ultramarine blue, which is here. And so I'm just going to add some paint or some water into my palette and shush it around. If you don't have room inside of that particular color pan on your palette, you can always do it in the lid, or you have a little maybe salad plate or something off to the side that you can mix up a puddle. You just want to have access to a good amount of blue so that you don't have to re-wet things as you go. And if you want to be fancy, you could have a secondary blue going at the same time, maybe a lighter one. This is called cerulean blue. So you could have two if you want. This is optional, but I just want to show you what happens if you use two different blues. So I'm just kind of working it around in there and getting it mixed up. The consistency of your paint when you're doing something like the sky or the grass should be like, it could either be the consistency of, if you can imagine, like tea or coffee. If you think about milk, milk is thicker than tea or coffee. So don't have it any thicker than milk. We don't want heavy whipping cream, and we don't want pudding. So you want coffee or tea or milk on this. Nothing is worse than dipping into paint and you think it's nice and juicy like that, and it's like toothpaste or it's like pudding, because it's so gooey and it's really hard to work with that way. Okay, ready to go on? I hope. Check your tree trunk. Hopefully it's just damp but not moist at all. I'm going to do this with a large brush because it will help me work faster. So whatever your largest brush that you're comfortable using, if you can grab that, things will go a little faster for you. And thanks Margaret. And what I'm doing is I'm going to go right over the top of these sticks, because it would be a pain to go around all this, and you might as well make your life easy since you're having fun on a Friday. It shouldn't be stressful. It should be fun and easy. So you can go right over those sticks because they're going to be darker than the blue. So we'll be able to paint right over the top of that blue. So here I go with just clear water up one side of the tree and up the other. I'm not getting it on those bushes though. I'm going around the bushes. But I'm just going to go right up the side here to the top, however tall your paper is, and then also on the other side. If you have to switch to a smaller brush when you get around that mushroom, you might want to do that, because you don't want to have that red from the mushroom traveling. And actually, if you don't get all the way up next to the mushroom, if you leave a little halo of white, that might make your life easier. So I'll do that here. I'm not going to go all the way to the mushroom. I'm leaving just a little bit that is staying dry, because I can use my brush to get in there with detail later when I need to. All right, and when you're ready, you're going to get your nice juicy whatever color blue. So mine is ultramarine and probably cerulean blue. And you're going to come over here and you'll really see that it moves very freely because we have all this water on here. And it makes it so much easier, especially if you have a small brush. This does a lot of the job for you. And if I can show you, I put that paint on, and if I'm tipping my paper like this, you can see that it's going to travel down around those bushes. See how it's making the line around the bushes? Because they're still dry. And here next to the tree, you can see it only goes where that water was. So that is a very helpful and handy thing for you to be able to do, because then you can come back in with your smaller brush and you can carve around things that maybe you couldn't get to when you were using your larger brush. I missed some over here, and now I can get really close to the tree trunk. But like I tell the kids at school, if your tree trunk was really still very wet, you don't want to go right up next to it because they're going to bleed together. So there's my blue, and now if you want to be fancy, you can get a second blue and just put a little in there. It just livens things up. I just did a couple little strips. I don't even have to mix it. It's going to mix itself because the paper is so wet that it's going to flow and blend around on its own. And now I'll do the other side. Woo, that's a lot of blue. If you do that and you get too much blue, you can do this. You can tip your paper and let it come down on its own. It'll dilute and it'll spread, and so it won't look like such a huge shock of blue. I got water on my other painting here. And then use your smaller brush to do your detail work around here. By the way, watercolor paint dries lighter than, it lightens as it dries. So even though this is a shock of intense blue right here, as it dries, it will become lighter. And here's where that blue is going to give me the other, it's going to define that white spot up there. That's why I didn't have to leave a line or anything. If something happens and you feel like, oh my gosh, I have way too much blue, you can take a little Kleenex and just blot it a little bit if you want to. But since it's so wet, you'll probably soak up a lot of it, so maybe you don't want to blot too much. And then fancy people can give yourself another shush of some other color of blue if you want to. Let's see, I'll do it just a little bit like that. And then sometimes I like to tip my paper and let the paint flow. You have to be a little careful with this because we have a lot of water on here and you don't want to accidentally keep it tipped for too long that it just forces its way into that tree trunk. So just a little bit of tipping, and there we go. You might ask yourself, I don't think I can see my sticks over here anymore. What should I do? Well, if you feel like you can't see the pencil lines for your sticks, here's a little trick. Your paint over there is still, where the sticks are, is still wet. So if you take a brush with just some clear water and you touch it on here with just water, it will actually lighten up some of this paint if you need to. You can even actually give it a little push and it'll kind of move that paint around a little bit for you, and you should be able to see a little more. And if you can't, I don't think it was all that hard to draw sticks, so you could always redraw and redarken if you need to. And if you don't mind, I'm going to use my dryer again real quick. So if you are done and you need to dry, feel free to do that. Careful, hair dryers have a lot of blasting power, so you don't want to hit it hard because you don't want to spray your paint around. This one doesn't blast quite like a hair dryer. By the way, I'm more concerned about drying over here on the left because of my sticks than I am on the right. I don't have to do anything else over here on the right, so I don't even really have to dry that side at all. So I'm going to dry mostly left and also a little bit on this green grassy area. So can you see the difference between the two sides of my paper? It's subtle right now, but this side is mostly dry and it's much lighter than that side. So that's kind of a good illustration of how much watercolor will fade as it's drying. And while you're finishing your painting, I'm going to talk about what comes next. And so I'll watch. If you start giving me thumbs up, I'll know that we're ready to go on. But just for the talking part, these are going to be the next things that happen. We're going to do the door, and then we're going to do the stones. Then we're going to do the sticks, including these guys above the door and the little cap. And we'll see what the door looks like after we've done it a second time. We may have to do it a third time. And then one of the last things we'll work on is these bushes and the mushroom stems. So that was, just to repeat, it was going to be door, then stones, then sticks, and maybe door again, and then bushes. And let me move this again so that you can see everything. This seems to be a good size paper so that I'm able to, make a nice painting but still have enough room to show you the completed one. You can see on this completed one I use a slightly different color of blue in the sky. I don't remember what that was. It might have been a phthalo blue. But don't feel like you always have to be stuck hard and fast with the colors that I recommend, because you can always have other colors. And since I'm waiting still to see if you're ready, I want to tell you about these new things I got. I'm so excited. I always like to tell people about products. I have never tried these before. These are Daniel Smith, and again, they don't pay me, but these are paint sticks. So it's kind of like, it feels like a crayon or a pastel, and you could actually, let's do it up here. You can actually make marks with it. So if you see right up here, I just drew with it. But it's just pigment, it's just solid pigment, and you could use it dry and then wet that area with a paintbrush. You could take a wet brush and gather paint right from here. You could break them up and put them into your paint wells like this instead of a tube. But I have never tried them, and I thought, oh, let me get 3 of those and try them, and they have been really fun. So if you've never heard of them, like I didn't know they existed, you may want to try them one day. Okay, I'm seeing some thumbs up, so let's get to getting. All right, what did I say? The next thing we're going to do is door. So let me switch around my palette so that I can get to my door colors a little more easily. I'd like you, if you have a burnt sienna, to use that. That would be a good color. Some people may have flat brushes too. The door is a great place to use a flat brush if you have it. This is a 1/2 inch flat. If you don't, of course you can do it with the round brush, but since I'm holding this, I might as well show you what it'll do. It gives you just a nice, you can cut in really good shapes with this, crisp lines and edges. So if you have a flat, feel free. Otherwise, use what you have. And I put my paint on. I scraped as much off as I could because I want it to be a little bit dry. Not as dry as we did with the bark, but I'm just going to do another layer over the top of this door. And you can see it starts to give us an interesting golden wood color. So kind of like a stain. We're almost like, yeah, we're staining the wood. And if you get stripes in it, that's okay because it's planks of wood. So here's a stripe right there. And it's just going to help us look like we have planks of wood for the door. So I keep having to dip in and come back to this. And I got these stripes going. This is again burnt sienna. If you don't have burnt sienna, you can use an orange, or you can make a brownish orange. This burnt sienna, the one that I have anyway, is essentially an orange paint. You can come up on the tip of this and really cut some straight lines in. So if I had to outline this door, I could come up on the tip of this brush, really get a nice clean line around there. And I'm going to stop there for right now. let you catch up on that. At the end of class, if you want to, there's inside of the event, there's a tab that says discussion, and that's a nice place for you to be able to post pictures of your completed paintings if you want to share them. So that's, go to the event, click on the discussion tab and post a painting there. It's nice for us to all see how everybody else's came out because they're all so different. If you have trouble making that happen, you can just post it on my page if you want. And your third option is I have a Facebook group, and the only people who can see that are the students, because you have to be you have to request to be in the group, and then I approve you, of course, because you're a student. And you can post your things there, and no one will see those except for the members of the group. So that's nice for those people who don't want to have the whole world see their work. Okay, I think maybe we're good to go on the door. Hopefully, it looks like I'm going to go back a third time on this one, so you can still see some of the yellow peeking through. So I'm back to my number 6 round brush, and I want to have some gray for these stones. So if you have black, you can dilute your black and with a lot of water, and then there you'll have a gray. Or maybe you have something called neutral tint, which is what I'm using, and it's kind of almost a purpley gray. If you don't have either of those, you can usually mix an orange and a blue together, and you can get a gray that way. But I'm guessing probably everybody has a black in their set. So all we're doing is just on dry paper, we're just going to paint these stones. And we're going to go over parts of them a second time because I want there to be a little bit darker area. As you can see on this one on the left, how the edges are a little darker. That's because we're going to go back a second time and do another pass on those, and that will really define them. Right now they're just going to look kind of like gray blobs. And your little bitty pebbly stones, you can keep them gray or you can give them another color, brown or whatever color you like. I like to mix two colors, so I'll use this gray and brown together. And I'll show you one in just a second as soon as I get these other guys done. If some little white hits show on yours, that's okay too, because maybe there's some white on these rocks. Okay, so for the little pebbly ones, I'll just paint them gray, and then while it's still wet, I'll take my brush and put it in a brown and just touch that on, maybe part of it, and all of a sudden we have a two-tone rock, and it just gives us a little more interest. Not everything is exactly the same color. So I paint it gray, then I touch a little bit of brown on, maybe just in one spot. Or you could paint them brown first and touch gray on. It's up to you. But it's nice to just have a variety in them, not all the same. And while you have that gray, you might as well do your mushroom stems with it. So here we go. You can paint right on over that green. Your green's going to show, but in a minute we're going to do another layer of this mushroom stem, and we should be able to cover up that green. I'm kind of just dabbing down here a little bit more gray, and it'll usually cover. I say usually because you just never know. Things are always a little different. And these guys over here. We're coming into the home stretch. We have about 10 minutes left, and I think we're going to make it, because pretty soon everything is just going to be little bitty details that sort of bring this thing together, kind of like when you have your outfit on but you have to put your jewelry on. So we'll finish up with the jewelry. You do want to make sure that this left side is dry before you do the sticks. So if you don't have any access to a hair dryer or a heat gun, you may have to wait a little while and paint the sticks on there, but it isn't a real technique heavy thing to paint the sticks. It should be, even if you have to do it without me, you should be able to be okay, I think. So are we ready for me to go forward, or do you need another minute? I think it looks like people need another minute. I'm not seeing any. Okay, Deanna, thank you. Okay, I'm seeing a couple thumbs up. Don't forget, this recording will stay on Facebook, so if it felt like it was too fast for you or you missed something, you can go back and watch the recorded part another time too. Okay, so your paper here is dry. You got some sticks happening. If you'll notice on this one, my sticks are, they're messy on purpose because it's out in nature and the fairies are finding whatever they can find. So the technique here is the paper is dry and you're just going to pick some kind of brown color and you're just going to paint your sticks. There's nothing special about it. You're just painting them. The only thing that you might consider, you might want to do is, just like we did in those rocks, we added another color into the rocks. It always gives more interest if we can add another color in. So I will probably choose a little bit of green. So let me do a few of these and then I'll show you adding green in there, what it'll look like. I kind of lost some of my sticks in the paint, but like I was saying, they're just sticks, so you'll probably be able to figure out how to redraw them or repaint them. Notice that I'm not painting them into where I have the bushes, so I'm stopping here because the bushes are going to cover up the bottom of the sticks, and we're going to leave that space for them. Let's see here, let's have something different. How about this one splits way down low? Maybe that's a little higher. Maybe this guy has got a bend and it overlaps here a little bit. Think about things. You guys are always so creative. When I see your paintings later, there'll be people that did different colors or they did fun things that I didn't think about. I wonder if anybody's going to end up having like a sign on their fairy house, welcome or keep out or beware of dog. Some people are going to think of clever things that they find in nature that they can add in here that I haven't thought of. I mean, I have my acorn lamp, but I bet you somebody will have some other cool thing that I didn't think about. Okay, so here's what I meant when I talked about adding green in. The sticks are still wet, and I have some green on my brush, and I'm just touching it here and there onto the sticks, just randomly here and there, and that gives me a little bit of green up in there, just a little variation. I'll hold it closer so you can see better because you may not be able to tell. There's also some chunks in there because of that chunky paint, and later on I'll be able to brush that away. There, I think you can see the green better. Okay. And when you are ready, you can take that green or a different green. I'll take that same green, which was sap green. And let's paint the bushes. And yes, the sticks are wet, and yes, the bushes are going to touch the wet sticks, but that's okay because it's going to bleed up into those sticks and give us an interesting effect. So I'm just doing kind of like I'm almost tapping my brush just gently to create this kind of bushy effect at the end. Just, I want an irregular shape. I don't want it to just be a spelled out line of bushes. I'm just trying to give it a little puffiness and a little irregularity. So there's one bush there. And then as I get closer down to the ground, I think I'll have another bush of a slightly different color green, because it's, again, all about variety. So maybe the other bush is this hooker's green now, and it will bleed in with the other one, but it's going to give us darker at the base here. I have to be careful around my little mushrooms. I think I need an even smaller brush right here. If you always take the brush that you need, so even if I tell you that you know, I might suggest using a bigger one, but if it's too big for little bitty areas like this, go ahead and get a small. Okay, there's the bushes. Oh, I forgot to do the sticks above the door. So since we just did those other sticks, why don't you throw those in? And they, in order for them to stand out against the already brown tree bark, you may really have to alter that color. I'm going to add a little bit of kind of, what am I going to make? I'm going to add a little bit of gray into that brown and see what I get, because I just need it to be really dark. There we go, it's darker. I may have to do 2 passes of this, or at least put the paint on kind of thicker. One of the things that you can also do is when your painting is all dry, if you really want something to have more definition or be a little spelled out a little more, there is no reason why you cannot use colored pencils or even just a regular pencil to kind of spice things up a little bit and give yourself some more definition. All right, we are practically out of time, so I'm going to quickly go through some things here. And if it frustrates you, you can, if you want to pause and let some of your paper dry while I do these things, at least I can run you through how I'm doing them, and you can go back and watch the end again, or you can just take a pause and then catch up. So I'm sorry, I hate to do that, but I'm trying to be respectful of your time also. So I'm going to go through a bunch of things here. I'm going to start with the door. Everything I do for now is going to be with one or the other of these brushes. So the number 6 or a little bitty detail brush. So on the door, I'm going to take another pass with some brown, just kind of giving myself some planks. Oops, look at all those chunks in there. Ick. Sorry. So I'm just striping that up. If you wanted to, you could use your detail brush to make little bitty lines in between the planks, kind of like I did on the painting on the left side. But I want it a little darker. There we go. Let's go like this. Boy, those lines are happening because of the chunks, so that is not ideal, and I'm glad it's happening to me and not you, because I can fix it. All right, so there's my door. If I need to, I can clean up the bottom or really identify the planks down here and how they're different lengths. Some are higher, some are lower. Okay, so that's one thing I can do. On the stones, we do need to have a second layer of the gray happening on there so that it looks like not just a flat, boring thing, but we're going to go a second time and just identify the sides of them. So the lighter area is the top portion that you actually step on when you're walking in, and this darker area is the side, the vertical part of the stone is there. We'll get this guy too. And this one. If you want to be fancy, you can give yourself some more darks down at the bottom of those. If you need to clean up your stems or do another pass on your stems, you can. Your light, if you put something like a little bit of that burnt sienna or the orange on part of it, like if I ring around it like this, it's almost like I'm creating a glow in the middle and I'm having it a little darker there. Can do that. Then we want this tree trunk to not just be flat like that. We need it to look like it's three-dimensional. So you can see how I have given some shadows around parts of it. And what I mean is this. So around all the areas, like here, I'm going to do a little darker, do a little shadowing. Maybe right here. And I can sometimes even come up here and blend them a little bit if I need to. But just give it a foundation. Let it have a way that it seems like it's really connecting to the earth and it's not just a flat piece of paper stuck there. And that happens by giving this darker area. You can even go around here a little bit. You can give yourself a dark side of the tree if you want. Maybe the light is coming, even though we have a light on here, maybe it's night, but even so, maybe one side of the tree is a little bit darker than the other. That helps us out. Okay, what else? On our mushroom, maybe the same thing, maybe one side's a little bit darker, or the underneath. Everything you do is trying to add dimension to this. And last but not least, once your grass is dry, you can take your little bitty brush and a green color. I'm going to choose Hooker's green because it's darker than what I have there. You can do some little fun things in the bushes, like just some little marks like this to give some dimension to the bushes, and you can give yourself lots of little pieces of grass. And notice here, the grass overlaps the tree root. That really helps plant it as well. So we can start here and you can just make some grass growing up where it goes over the tree a little bit, and they don't all have to bend straight up. They might tip, maybe a little bit in here, wherever you want to do. And I'm going kind of fast, so it's a little messy here. Let me clean this up. There we go. And here and there, maybe you want some sprouts of grass around. Oops, that was a little too wet. Sorry, I forgot my stone was wet there. But we can put some here. If you have trouble with your stem, you can always plant some grass down at the base and hide things. Grass is perfect for hiding stuff that gives you problems. The grass can be various different colors too. Maybe you have some brown grass. Maybe we can't really do yellow because it won't show up. But here's a little bit darker grass, maybe. What else can we do? The door handle needs to come at the very end because it's too wet right now. But your door handle can be drawn on if you want, or painted on, and figure out what kind of handle is appealing to you. It doesn't have to be like the one I have. You can spell out your door planks a little bit more. It's not going to be super effective for me right now because the door is still wet, and so the paint bleeds. I'm sorry I'm rushing you at the end, but I want to get everything to you and get you out of here so that you can watch whatever you're watching on Netflix. And I think that that's probably about it. I'm looking back and forth between the two. Oh, if you would like to add some moss or something above the door, mine is very wet right now, so it may not work, but I'll try. I'm getting, it's helpful if your green is a little bit thicker. Still not so much pudding, but maybe really thick. It's probably going to bleed, but I'll try. Okay. You can just kind of indicate maybe some moss somehow, or give yourself a little plant somewhere, some more pebbles. Maybe there's a pet in the yard somewhere, or other little creatures. I'm going to drop some yellow in here too, see what happens. And there we go. I think we're good. What are you watching on Netflix tonight, and what is for dinner? I'm not watching Netflix tonight, I don't think. I was watching a movie earlier. What was it? I forgot. I was watching Notting Hill. So actually I may watch that. But tonight is Brussels sprouts and shrimpies. So that is my dinner tonight. And I have some lovely chocolate pudding for dessert. So we always talk about what I'm going to eat. It's funny. But yes, that's what's for dinner. I really hope you enjoyed yourself. I want to turn the camera back so I could say goodbye to you in real life. So if you get dizzy, look away. And then I'll put it back down on the table again so that you can look at this a little bit while I kind of close things out here. Okay. All right. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed this. I've loved having you here as always. And next month it is April 23rd. Again, if you want to make a request, you can pop it in the chat right now for what you might like to paint next month, because I haven't decided yet. And also share your pictures. It would be great to see them. So thank you very much. Yay. Happy spring break if you're on spring break like me. Yay. And happy Easter. And I'll see you soon. All right, I'm going to put it back down on the table for you. Have a good night. Bye. Okay, so here we go. And I always put this up too. Yes, it is a free class, but in case you're wanting to tip, I think that this will fit in the picture here. Thank you for coming. There we go. How about that?